In the barren heart of the Mojave Desert, where temperatures soar above 110 degrees and rattlesnakes outnumber people, there stands a monument to human greed, ambition, and the devastating power of market manipulation. This is Calico, California, a ghost town that didn't die of natural causes. It was murdered. Murdered by the same forces that are trying to crush the silver market today. In 1881, thousands flocked to these desolate mountains, chasing the gleam of silver in the rocks. Within a decade, they had extracted over $20 million worth of precious metal, building a thriving city in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Then, almost overnight, it all vanished. The mines went silent, the saloons emptied, the streets turned to dust. But here's what they don't tell you in the history books. Calico didn't fail because the silver ran out. It failed because powerful interests in Washington and Wall Street decided to change the rules of the game. The same playbook they're using right now. If you want to understand what's happening to silver today, you need to understand what happened to Calico. Because history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. The story begins in March 1881, when prospectors discovered massive silver deposits in the Calico Mountains of San Bernardino County. The news spread like wildfire across the West. Within months, a tent city had sprouted in the desert. By the end of the year, Calico had transformed from empty wasteland into a booming metropolis of several thousand souls, all chasing the same dream, striking it rich on silver. The geology of Calico was extraordinary. The mountains contained veins of silver ore so rich that early miners could literally see the metal glinting in the rock face. The flagship discovery was the Silver King mine, which became one of the most productive silver operations in California history. But Silver King was just the beginning. Within 5 years, the Calico mining district had spawned over 500 active mines, with names that reflected the optimism of the age: Waterloo, Bismarck, Oriental, Garfield, and dozens more. The scale of the operation was staggering. Stamp mills pounded day and night, crushing tons of ore. Mule trains hauled supplies up the mountain and silver bars down to the railroad. The sound of pickaxes striking rock echoed through the canyons 24 hours a day. This wasn't small-time prospecting. This was industrial-scale extraction, financed by serious money from San Francisco and the East Coast. The Calico mining district was producing wealth on a scale that rivaled the legendary Comstock lode in Nevada. At its peak, Calico was a fully functional city carved into the side of a mountain. The main street, optimistically named Wall Street, was lined with over 20 saloons, numerous hotels, restaurants, general stores, a newspaper office, a school, and even a Chinatown district where immigrant laborers lived. The population estimates vary, but most historians agree that between 3,000 and 5,000 people called Calico home during the boom years. For perspective, that made it larger than Los Angeles at the time. The wealth flowing out of these mountains was real and measurable. Conservative estimates place the total silver extracted from Calico between 1881 and 1896 at approximately $20 million in period dollars. Adjusted for inflation and considering the purchasing power of silver then versus now, that represents hundreds of millions in modern wealth. Some less conservative estimates push the total production closer to $86 million, though these figures are harder to verify. What's undeniable is that Calico was a cash machine, enriching miners, merchants, and investors alike. Life in Calico was rough but prosperous. Miners earned good wages, several dollars a day, which was excellent money in the 1880s. The saloons were full every night. The general stores sold everything from pickaxes to champagne. There was even a red light district, because wherever men strike it rich, certain industries inevitably follow. Despite the harsh desert environment, Calico had everything a frontier town needed: commerce, entertainment, community, and most importantly, a reason to exist. That reason was silver. The technological innovation happening in Calico was also remarkable. Miners were using some of the most advanced extraction techniques of the era. They employed diamond drills, which were cutting-edge technology at the time. They used elaborate systems of shafts, tunnels, and hoists to bring ore to the surface. The Silver King mine alone had tunnels extending hundreds of feet into the mountain, with multiple levels and sophisticated ventilation systems. This wasn't primitive mining. This was modern industrial extraction employing the best engineering knowledge of the Victorian age. But underneath all this prosperity, underneath the celebration and the wealth creation, there was a vulnerability that nobody wanted to acknowledge. The entire city, with its thousands of residents and millions in investment, rested on one single variable: the price of silver. As long as silver held its value, Calico thrived. But if that price were to fall, everything would collapse. The residents of Calico believed silver was as good as gold. They believed it was real money, backed by thousands of years of human history. They believed the market was free and fair. They were wrong. What killed Calico wasn't geology. The veins of silver still ran deep through the Calico Mountains. What killed Calico was politics and financial manipulation, a coordinated attack on the price of silver orchestrated by powerful banking interests and their allies in Washington. This is the part of the story that gets glossed over in tourist brochures, but it's the most important part. Because what happened to silver in the 1890s is exactly what's happening to silver right now. Throughout the 1880s, silver traded at approximately $1.31 per ounce. This price was maintained partly by market demand, but also by government policy. The United States was on a bimetallic standard, meaning both gold and silver served as monetary metals. Various laws required the government to purchase silver and mint it into coins. This created a floor under the silver price and gave miners, like those in Calico, confidence that their product would always have value. But powerful forces wanted to change this system. The banking elite of the East Coast, centered in New York and allied with European financial powers, wanted America on a pure gold standard. Why? Because gold was scarce, and they controlled most of it. Silver was more abundant, and silver mines in the West represented decentralized wealth creation that they couldn't fully control. A gold standard would concentrate financial power in their hands. A silver standard would democratize wealth. So, silver had to be destroyed. The weapon they used was the Sherman Silver Purchase Act of 1890, but not in the way you might think. The act required the Treasury to purchase 4.5 million ounces of silver monthly and issue paper currency against it. On the surface, this seemed supportive of silver, but it was a trap. The banking interests knew the act was unsustainable and would eventually be repealed. And when that happened, the psychological shock would devastate the silver market. They were setting up a controlled demolition. The trigger was pulled in 1893. Following a series of bank failures and a manufactured financial panic, what history calls the Panic of 1893, President Grover Cleveland and the banking interests declared that silver was the cause of the crisis. This was a lie. The crisis was caused by railroad overbuilding, speculation, and banking fraud. But silver made a convenient scapegoat. Congress, under pressure from Wall Street, repealed the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. The government stopped buying silver. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. With the government no longer providing a bid in the market, the price of silver collapsed. Within months, silver had fallen from $1.31 per ounce to under 90 cents. By 1896, it had crashed to approximately 63 cents per ounce, a decline of more than 50%. This wasn't a market correction. This was a coordinated attack. The banking cartel had successfully rigged the rules to destroy the value of silver and crush the independent wealth of the mining West. For Calico, this was a death sentence. The economics of silver mining are straightforward. You need to extract and process ore at a cost lower than the market price of the metal. At $1.31 per ounce, the rich veins of Calico were fantastically profitable. At 63 cents per ounce, even the best mines operated at a loss. The stamp mills couldn't run. The miners couldn't be paid. The investors couldn't see returns. The entire economic engine seized up. The collapse happened with shocking speed. In 1892, just 1 year after the peak, several major mines began shutting down. By 1895, the Silver King mine, the crown jewel of Calico, had closed its doors. By 1896, virtually every significant mining operation in the district had ceased. The miners packed their gear, loaded their mules, and walked away. What choice did they have? You can't mine silver at a profit when the price has been artificially suppressed below the cost of production. But here's the critical detail that connects Calico to today. The silver didn't disappear. The veins were still there. The ore was still in the ground. The demand for silver in industry and coinage hadn't vanished. What changed was purely the paper price, a price set by bankers and politicians in distant cities, not by the free market. The physical reality of silver hadn't changed, only the narrative had changed. The bankers had successfully convinced the world that silver was worthless, even as they quietly accumulated physical metal for themselves. Walk through Calico today, and you'll see the evidence of this manipulation everywhere. The mines weren't exhausted. They weren't played out. They were simply abandoned mid-operation. Tunnels that could have gone deeper were left unfinished. Veins that still contained ore were left unmined. Buildings were left with tools still on the workbenches, as if the miners had just stepped out for lunch and never came back. This wasn't the natural death of a depleted resource. This was murder by market manipulation. The human cost was staggering. Thousands of people lost their livelihoods overnight. Merchants who had stocked their stores found themselves with inventory they couldn't sell, and customers who couldn't pay. Hoteliers found themselves with empty rooms. Families who had built lives in Calico had to pack everything they owned onto wagons and head back to wherever they came from. Dreams shattered. The wealth that had been created wasn't lost to nature or bad luck. It was stolen by a coordinated manipulation of the monetary system. And here's the most infuriating part. The same people who destroyed the silver price in the 1890s were buying physical silver at the suppressed prices. While they told the public that silver was worthless and obsolete, they were accumulating the physical metal, knowing full well that industrial demand would eventually reassert itself. They wanted to shake out the miners and the small holders so they could consolidate control of the supply. It was the greatest wealth transfer of the 19th century, and it happened through pure manipulation. After 1900, Calico became what it remains today. A ghost town. The buildings slowly deteriorated under the relentless desert sun. Wooden structures dried out and collapsed. Glass windows shattered. The wind filled the empty saloons with sand. Occasionally, someone would attempt to restart mining operations. There were small revivals in the 1910s and 1930s, including attempts to reprocess the old tailings using cyanide extraction. But nothing approached the scale of the original boom. The town that had housed thousands now housed maybe a dozen stubborn holdouts. The transformation from living city to dead monument happened in less than a decade. That's how fast wealth can be destroyed when the rules are changed. The residents of Calico in 1890 thought they were secure. They had real assets, silver in the ground, functioning businesses, a growing community. 5 years later, it was all worthless. Not because the fundamentals changed, but because the price was manipulated into oblivion. In the 1950s, Walter Knott, founder of Knott's Berry Farm, purchased the ruins of Calico and began restoring it as a tourist attraction. He rebuilt buildings in the style of the 1880s, turning the ghost town into a living museum. Today, Calico is a regional park operated by San Bernardino County, covering approximately 480 acres. It's a popular stop for tourists driving between Barstow and Las Vegas. You can walk the dusty streets, peer into reconstructed buildings, and tour some of the old mines. It's entertaining, it's educational, but it's also sanitized. The tourist brochures tell you about the silver boom and bust, but they don't tell you about the manipulation. They don't tell you about the bankers who rigged the game. The lesson of Calico is the lesson of every commodity boom and bust in history. When you allow a small group of powerful interests to control the price discovery mechanism, they will use that power to extract wealth from everyone else. The miners of Calico created real value. They extracted real metal from the earth through hard, dangerous work. But that value was stolen from them through manipulation of paper markets and government policy. The wealth didn't evaporate. It was transferred to the banking cartel that crashed the silver price. This exact pattern has repeated throughout history. In 1980, the Hunt brothers attempted to corner the silver market, driving the price to $50 per ounce. The banks and exchanges responded by changing the rules, declaring liquidation-only trading that forced the price to collapse. In 2011, when silver rallied to $49, the exchanges raised margin requirements multiple times to create forced selling. In 2021, during the Reddit silver squeeze, brokerages disabled buy buttons and restricted trading. And now, in 2025, with silver breaking above $75, we're seeing the exact same playbook: emergency margin hikes, trading restrictions, and coordinated manipulation to suppress the price. Calico California stands as a monument to what happens when free markets are corrupted by powerful interests. The city didn't die because the silver ran out. It died because bankers and politicians decided that silver needed to be destroyed to consolidate their power. Thousands of people lost everything, not through any fault of their own, but through coordinated market manipulation that would be recognized as criminal if it happened today. Except it is happening today, and they're still getting away with it. The abandoned mines of Calico still contain silver. The geology hasn't changed. What changed in the 1890s was purely the paper price, manipulated downward to transfer wealth from miners and citizens to the banking elite. Today, we're watching the same forces attempt the same manipulation. They're raising margins, restricting trading, spoofing orders, and using every dirty trick to suppress the silver price and protect their short positions. But just like in the 1890s, the physical metal is real, the shortage is real, and eventually, reality wins. The difference is that this time, we know their playbook. We've seen this movie before, and we're not leaving. Calico is a warning from history. Hold the physical metal, demand delivery, and never trust the paper price created by the very people who profit from your loss.